Pasito tum tum, pasito tum tum, pasito tum tum, pasito tum tum.
Hello, this is Willie, and welcome to part 3 of this miniseries, Deep in the Noir. So let's not waste any more time, and let's talk about Double Indemnity and Basic Instinct. What did they have in common? Femme Fatales.
I might not be the most qualified to talk about women, but as I've talked about the tone and the black and white of Noir, I would like to understand more the Femme Fatale. Now I was gonna compare Double Indemnity to Body Heat because from story-wise, they're the most common like. They're both about a man who falls under the seduction of a married woman to kill off her husband so she can inherit all of his money. But I wanted to see more layers of the Femme Fatale with Sharon Stone's interpretation of Basic Instinct. After all, these women have different reasons to why they lure men into their doom, but have similar goals in mind nonetheless.
And honestly, because I didn't have available clips for Body Heat, so if you could donate one clip for a minute, as I explain what makes the Femme Fatale into the Black Widow we know her as.
For thousands of years, women have been depicted as a symbol of beauty or the temptations of the flesh. A Femme Fatale is mostly defined as an attractive and seductive woman, especially one who will ultimately bring disaster to a man who becomes involved with her. The first traces of the Femme Fatale in American movies were in A Fool There Was, about a vampire, also nicknamed as the Vamp, that lured men into the destruction. She would be the first sex symbol image to represent the empowerment of women by the use of extreme measures, and she would later be homaged in Body Heat, as their female lead would wear the nickname of the Vamp. Some of the early depictions of the Femme Fatale came from the Bible with the idolatress Jezebel, to the deceiving Delilah known for sleeping with Samson only to take away his strength.
The majority of them have carried the image of the sexy, narcissist woman with a web of lies and secrets that devours her victims. In this case, man.
Even though not all of them are portrayed as bad people, sometimes they're just victims of a world of men. But this change of tone from a conservative image with women came at the time America was culturally changing during the war. When the men went to battle leaving their women, they became more active from their common social standards of being mothers and wives. They were wielding, working in factories, helping in the war. They were actually making money from the jobs of man. For the first time, they had a sense of independence for being able to do something that man could, until the war ended and women went back to the kitchen and baby booming days as before. But with these changes in America after the war, Noir showcased a sense of giving women independence from men, from marriage, from family values.
I want to be somebody. If I walk out like this, I'll lose everything and I'll never be anybody.
But that doesn't mean that they were role models to follow either.
Since they enter into the cynical world of Noir, women were far more dangerous than men, as they had more psychological reasons to be angry at them.
1. They live in a world of man that is fully controlled by them. 2. Men love to worship strength and power. And because women didn't have a bigger than life stature, they were demoted by man as weak, ignorant, second class that had to submit to obedience, and they can surely expect punishment if they don't follow their social norms. Anyone that's limited of their full potential can grow up to be psychologically devastated. I mentioned in my 2001 Interstellar review how sometimes control over others is the biggest evil in the world, because it never ends well. When someone is not given the option of choice, they can become a ticking bomb that could lead to some drastic consequences, and what would be considered as an act of rebellion. And from that anger towards men, these Femme Fatales broke the norm of being the beautiful, sweet, comforting woman to a manipulator, a seductress, even at times a murderer that uses her beautiful advantages to use men for their personal gains, either for money or power. Symbolized with the smoke of their cigar, how that represents their passionate lust or the wrath of the Femme Fatale. One of the common traits that the main lead women share in Double Indemnity and Basic Instinct is their desire for control. They lust over it. They take pleasure in having control over men's bodies, their mind, their emotions, and use it against them to represent all the history of oppression. Phyllis represents the wrath of women in the 40s, and Catherine represents the vengefulness of women between the 80s and 90s.
Put in that way, it's vicious to say nonetheless, given the environment that shaped them into what they turn into.
Another common life they share is they show signs of having APD, also known as antisocial personality disorder. This is a behavior where the person is extremely manipulative, pretends to feel something he or she's not, conniving liar, narcissistic, violent, and even charismatic. And these girls possess most of these qualities. They're both manipulative, they're abstain from feeling emotions, they're narcissistic, and they're violent too. Phyllis, played by Barbara Stanwyck, seduces Walter, played by Fred McMurray, an insurance man, to murder her husband so she can inherit his money. But Catherine seems to be the most extreme of the two for how she manipulates the situation with how she handles herself. She's cold, calm, and confident. She's a crime novelist writer who bases all of her stories on her real-life murder victims. I mean, she's so good at hiding the truth that she could tell anyone she murdered someone and they wouldn't know if it's true or not.
What's your new book about?
A detective. He falls for the wrong woman.
What happens?
She kills him.
They're also abstain from showing mercy or emotions, as Phyllis doesn't love her husband or her stepdaughter. She doesn't even love Walter, or does she? It's one of those moments when you ask either if she's lying to still get inside his head.
No, I never loved you, Walter, not you or anybody else. I'm rotten to the heart. I used you just as you said. That's all you ever meant to me. Until a minute ago.
While Catherine's career as a crime writer has made her cold and far removed from her feelings, that she can manipulate her own emotions.
You working on another book?
Yes, I am.
It must really be something making stuff up all the time.
Yeah, it teaches you to lie.
She can make others feel sorry for her and even pass a lie detector, showing how detached from her emotions she really is.
Now that's a new level of crazy sociopath American Psycho would be proud of.
Now what motivates them like Phyllis is, not necessarily by greed, but by the lack of companionship that her husband doesn't grant her, and when he does is mostly to show preference to his stepdaughter and demonstrate control over her life.
He's so mean to me. Every time I buy a dress or a pair of shoes, he yells his head off. He never lets me go anywhere. He keeps me shut up. He's always been mean to me. Even his life insurance all goes to that daughter of his.
Nothing for you at all, huh?
No, and nothing is just what I'm worth to him.
When she meets Walter, he gives her that chance to be set free from her husband's control, and then her motives turn into greed. Catherine's motivations go beyond any reasonable femme fatale. She doesn't do it for money or power, but for the thrill of it, to see if she can get away with it. How they lure men to pursue their goals are very distinctive. Since the 40s still relied on the motion picture code, Phyllis doesn't expose much of her body to seduce. She relies on her looks, charms, and tight dresses to get what she wants from men. While as for Catherine, uses her body as a weapon for her diabolical schemes. That it almost got an NC-17 rating. She has a psychology minor, so she knows how to manipulate and get inside people's heads.
In this case, man.
She knows what are man's sexual desires, what do they want, what they fantasize about, and she fulfills them, whether if it's giving them dirty talk, lesbian crush, or explicit sex. But it's all cleverly done so they can fall into her trap.
I like men like that. Men who give me pleasure. He gave me a lot of pleasure.
Now the screenplay for Basic Instinct was written during the 80s, which came out in the 90s. Back then, when despite women now being able to work in professional jobs with men, and even having a higher position than them, they were still facing mistreatment with sexual harassment and low pay salaries. So what better way for retribution than having an over-sexualized woman that gives men what they want, only to stab them where it hurts them the most?
It's nice.
Indeed.
You know, it's funny how 2010 wants to look like a progressive decade, and you try so hard to look like the 80s? You're almost there, guys. You're almost there. You're doing pretty good, 2010. Yeah.
Concerning their violent nature, in the 40s it would have been shocking for a woman to be this bloodthirsty. For how Phyllis helps kill her husband, they mention how she killed her husband's first lover and she tries to kill Walter in the end. But the difference between the two is Phyllis is a more passive killer while Catherine is a more active one. She doesn't personally kill her husband, we never see her kill her husband's first lover, and Walter's death is left to our interpretation in the end, whether he'll die from being hanged as an accomplice or from loss of blood. It's like she's more comfortable when relying on someone else doing her dirty work, demonstrating from her face when she can go from a scared person to a satisfied killer. If I could make a small comparison with the Femme Fatale from Body Heat, is that she's more way pacifist than Phyllis is. That at times she looks like the more healthy one compared to Phyllis. When as for Catherine, is a disturbing twisted mind. She murders a rock star in the beginning and cryptically mentions how she killed her college teacher and maybe even her parents and writes them in her book. The fact that she hangs out with killers and psychopaths is more disturbing to question whether she does it to get ideas for her books or because she wants to learn from them, or both. Maybe Phyllis was far beyond from any redemption, but I believe she was the healthiest of the two, and if given the right guidance, she probably could have been redeemed before her first kill. When as for Catherine, was a disturbed mind since she was young and probably was far beyond from any redemption. And without any spoiler, I have my suspicions of which detective she meant in the early clip I showed you that she would kill in the end.
But how can you justify these women being so cold to men if they're not portrayed as unlikable, out-of-control pigs or gritty, idiotic pigs?
In Basic Instinct, Michael Douglas plays Nick as the out-of-control pig. He's a cynical detective who struggles with addictions and tries to keep it under control, but also has a dark past of accidental murder. When he meets Catherine, she exposes his weaknesses to make him once again out of control.
I told you I quit.
It won't last.
When as for Walter's killing is more intentional out of selfish reasons. He's not fully respected by his colleagues who don't recognize him as a smart guy.
Guess I was wrong. You're not smarter, Walter. You're just a little taller.
While Nick gets involved with her to solve the case, which in the end falls under her seduction, Walter immediately falls under her seduction, notably calling her baby all the time.
I love you, baby. You bet I'll get out of here, baby. I don't want you to hang, baby. That's the way you operate, isn't it, baby? Listen, baby. They're not going to hang you, baby. Oh, baby.
But maybe he helps her commit the crime not just for lust, but to prove that he is smart and can get away with something that collaborative. After all, he's the one who came up with the plan to kill her husband. He does it for his pride, his ego, his manhood, to prove his superiority to his friends and his lover.
And for the most part in Noir, the leading man doesn't get the girl in the end.
In a way, it's another form of punishing the male lead. They're forced to sacrifice something in the end, either their lives, their freedom, or the girl. And since Hollywood has always been used to the hero getting the girl, Noir doesn't excuse the option just because they're man. They can also be denied their reliever of grievances in the end and instead receive the bitter loneliness of death. It parodies the family values of the American dream to tragedies and losses.
I didn't get the money and I didn't get the woman.
While Noir has depicted some tough and strong female leads, they're not always role models that women should condone their actions as an example. And even though Catherine is a more fascinating villain than Phyllis, I see Double Indemnity as a better movie, even better than Body Heat. While they can both suffer from slow paces at times, they can deliver some very suspenseful scenes. But because we know who the killer is in Basic Instinct, sometimes the suspense doesn't hold up as good. While as Double Indemnity works as a flashback from Walter's point of view, letting us know how and what led to the crime. And it's done very effectively by Billy Wilder, the director of Sunset Boulevard. So, moral of the story? Treat your woman as the apple of your eye, or hell had no fury like a woman's lust.
Thanks for watching part 3 of this video. Now tune in next time for my 4th and final part of this mini-series as I talk about Neo-Noir's Chinatown and LA Confidential. Until then, I leave you with some wise words from Sir Ian McKellen.
Mr. Lorio, never trust a beautiful woman, especially one who's interested in you.
Pasito tum tum, pasito tum